Hey, welcome. My name is Rachel Smith, and this is the Natural Health Rising podcast. I am a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and the owner of Natural Health Rising, which is my online holistic functional medicine company where I help people who have autoimmune diseases, chronic illnesses, mystery symptoms, and a whole host of other imbalances restore their health by natural means. On this podcast, you're going to hear conversations between myself and other health experts on functional medicine and general holistic health. My goal is to provide you with the tools you need in order to help you rise to your healthiest and happiest self. All right, Julie, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. So let's jump right into have you tell us about your story. Like, how did you get into what you're doing now with your career? And maybe there's some sort of health story related to it, or just go into that.
Sure. So I am a nurse practitioner and I have been in traditional medicine for over 20 years. And it wasn't until about probably 9 years ago that I really kind of started to take more of a holistic approach to health in general. That started, with myself and my family, which is probably the story for most of us that do this. You kind of test things out on yourself and you get interested in them that way. And then that translated into what I was doing with my patients. I left traditional medicine altogether about 2.5 years ago and have just been doing really mainly gut health, some nutritional coaching, but gut health is my primary focus. So I have an online virtual consulting practice and just try to do a lot of education around that and am really passionate about it because I had tons of gut issues for most of my life, dating back into my 20s. I, had all of the issues: bloating, gas, constipation, indigestion, couldn't eat certain foods. And that became more and more restrictive as time went on. And, all the things that, now people, I'm able to help people with. And so through my own journey, I realized, how freeing and how wonderful it was to be rid of all of those problems. And so that, of course, made me want to share even more with my patients. So.
Amazing. So you said that you over time felt more and more restricted with foods as you were going through these health issues. And I know that I hear that happen a lot with other people. So how did you get over that? And what was that healing process like for you?
Yeah. So I think when I really started to put it together, I probably started eating super clean and healthy probably about 14 to 15 years ago. And what I noticed happening was even, over time, even with healthy foods, I wouldn't feel good, and it may not just be my stomach. It may have been something like headache or brain fog, things like that can happen with food intolerances or sensitivities. And so, I was doing all the right things. Seemingly, I was eating all of the right foods, seemingly, except for I eliminated those again that, didn't sit well with me. I was exercising. I was drinking lots of water, taking supplements, getting sleep. I did have a lot of stress, so that definitely played a factor. But for the most part, pretty healthy. But I knew there was still something not right because, I knew it wasn't normal to not be able, to eat these seemingly healthy foods. And that's when I discovered the GI map test. And so really testing for me is what really uncovered the root cause of what was going on in my body once I went through a healing protocol, which included supplementation, some more dietary changes and lifestyle changes. That's really what healed my gut.
Okay. Did you have, or have you ever had certain infections like parasites, H. pylori, Candida? Mm-hmm. What was going on in your gut?
Yeah. So funny. It reminds me of, I have a colleague who she and I actually have put together a course around GI mapping for other practitioners to help them implement it into their practice. She and I started out really about the same time on the same journey. She was having some issues, not as many as me, but she wanted to test herself. And she, like me, had a ton of things wrong with her. And she said to me, I'm the healthiest person I know. I cannot believe this is my test, and that's kind of how I felt. So on my test, I did have H. pylori. I had 2 parasites. I had Blastocystis hominis and Giardia. Lots of dysbiosis. I did not have Candida. That's one thing and I've had several GI maps done over time, but never had Candida, thank the Lord. And I wasn't digesting fat properly, making enough digestive enzymes. My immune system was almost non-existent despite all of these things that I was doing. And a lot of that was the stress and the food sensitivities. And, having those pathogens in my body was like really trying to fight those off. And it just really weakened my immune system. So that I had all of that. It was a lot.
That is a lot. I've also had H. pylori before. I feel like that's a pretty common one. What is it, like 50% of the population has H. pylori?
Well, actually, I was just looking at this not that long ago, and the CDC estimates 66% of the world's population. So that's not just the United States, but that's all over the world. So yeah, it's very high. It's very contagious. When I see patients that have it, we do talk a lot about the fact that, it's highly likely that their family members have it as well. So, that is a discussion to be had too with people who have H. pylori. Yes.
So since it's so prevalent, let's dive into that first. So for people who don't know, just tell us a little bit, like, what is H. pylori, maybe some symptoms associated with it, and then we can get into whether or not we should treat, and if so, how to do that. So let's start off with like symptoms and what is it?
Okay, perfect. So H. pylori is a bacterial pathogen, and it's interesting. It is, if you do any reading about it, it is said to be the most successful pathogen in human history. Isn't that crazy? It's just things like that, just facts like that kind of interest me. It causes a lot of stomach ulcers. Actually, 90% of duodenal ulcers are caused from H. pylori, 80% of gastric ulcers. So there's a high incidence of ulcers and also gastric cancer. It actually puts you at a 6 times higher risk for gastric cancer. So again, something that in most people we want to get rid of, and we can discuss that because there are some different schools of thought around that. So I'll be happy to talk about that as well. So with H. pylori, you could have a host of different symptoms. It definitely causes some inflammation in the gut lining. It often causes maldigestion, where people will say, I just feel like food is sitting on my stomach and not digesting. And that was one of my symptoms. Part of that is from the low stomach acid that it causes. That's also the term for that. The medical term is called hypochlorhydria, if anyone's ever heard that. And that's because H. pylori actually makes an enzyme called urease, and that enzyme causes your stomach to produce less acid. So we need acid in our stomach to digest our food properly. If we don't have that, we're going to feel bloated. We're going to probably have gas, maybe constipation, feel like, again, food is just sitting on our stomach. Often, as you know, probably with ulcers, you can have things like indigestion, heartburn, reflux, those type symptoms. Other things that people sometimes don't correlate is H. pylori can cause a lot of nutritional deficiencies. Things like a low magnesium, selenium, calcium, B12, zinc, like all of those minerals can be deficient in your body just from the H. pylori. And another one that I see a lot is because it can cause some inflammation in the nervous system, it causes things like anxiety or possibly depression, mood swings. Those are very common symptoms that I see in patients who have H. pylori.
Yeah. And let's when we're talking about stomach acid, do you find that a lot of people who are coming to you with acid reflux and are put on PPIs or they're taking antacids, really that the reason that they have it is H. pylori? And yeah, let's talk about that connection and maybe what PPIs and things like that are actually doing to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, and something that is kind of counterintuitive. We think, because here's what people think, and I understand it. I used to think the same thing. That if you have indigestion, heartburn, reflux, that, oh, you must have high stomach acid. And that's actually not the case. Not that some people don't have that, but the majority of people, it is not a high acid problem. It's actually a low acid problem. So to kind of help you understand this, think about it this way. First of all, your esophagus comes down and connects to your stomach, right? Well, if we don't have enough stomach acid and food is sitting on our stomach, it's not being digested, as readily as it needs to be, then those food contents and the acid that is in the stomach is going to kind of push back up and reflux, so to speak, back up into the esophagus. Well, the esophagus the lining is very delicate. Any amount of acid, even if it's low acid, that gets into the esophagus is going to cause symptoms like that. So that's why you can still have the symptoms of heartburn, still have reflux, and it actually be a low acid problem. So proton pump inhibitors, or PPIs, actually are making the issue worse, and they have a lot of side effects. I mean, they were initially designed for a very short-term use, 6 weeks in someone who has an ulcer that needs to be healed. But they have now just been, they're over the counter, they're given out like candy, and they have, a lot of negative side effects to them. And so if you are taking a PPI, there are, other natural things that can be done. But what I think people need to understand is your H. pylori, if you do have H. pylori, let's say, and you're still taking a PPI, it's not going to go away. We have to get the acid of the stomach restored, the lining of the gut healthy, in order for, the H. pylori to be eradicated and you to have a healthy gut.
Right.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Totally. Great explanation. And it's, PPIs in my mind and antacids and all that is a Band-Aid approach where the Band-Aid keeps falling off. And the real answer is most likely or potentially H. pylori or something deeper going on there. Mm-hmm. And I even know PPIs can cause things like osteoporosis because they block calcium absorption in the GI tract. And so you can develop even worse off conditions and issues down the road with that prolonged use of them. As you're saying, really, they were only meant for a few weeks. And now people just are on them for years and years and years, like it's no big deal. Mm-hmm. So that is crazy. So how does somebody typically, well, actually, before we get into how we're going to self-treat or how someone would maybe go about taking care of H. pylori, what is the different schools of thought around it? Because I know that some people believe that we should just leave it and it's good in a sense. And then a lot of other people like you and I believe that we should get rid of it. So start there.
Yes. So there are some practitioners that have, the school of thought that if, let's say, you test for H. pylori and there is some present, but it's in very low levels, and the patient doesn't have symptoms, then, it can be left alone and, it's not causing any harm, so to speak. Where I have the issue with that is number one, most patients that I see have symptoms. There are some people now that will come and want to do like a GI map as a just a preventative measure, but the majority of people, they have some symptoms. And the other issue is that H. pylori causes so many other issues, like what I like to call downstream issues. So not only does it cause this low stomach acid, then you've got this, maldigestion. So typically you have some symptoms. It also then, I see a lot of correlation with some of the other opportunistic bacteria that we see on testing that are often overgrown when you have H. pylori. And that cycle in the dysbiosis is not going to go away unless we treat the underlying problem, the real issue, which again is typically the H. pylori. There are also some parasites that are seen more commonly with H. pylori. So that's, if anybody ever says, well, it doesn't need to be treated, I would say, hopefully they are referring to patients who have very low levels and no symptoms. I mean, that would be the only time in my mind that I would say, okay, well, then it's a discussion to have with the patient to explain all of this and say, well, would you prefer treatment, or would you prefer not? And that's why, working with a provider has to be a partnership, and all of this needs to be discussed.
Mm-hmm. So if I was the patient and I had H. pylori and I said, yes, I want to go in and take care of this, what would be the next steps for me?
Great question. So if let's say you were going the traditional medical route, which I know you necessarily wouldn't be, but somebody might want to, you're going to get a couple of different antibiotics plus a proton pump inhibitor, maybe even also some bismuth. I mean, it's typically a 3 to 4 drug regimen, right? If you are going to treat it naturally, there are actually quite a few different options. So the way that I do this is I like to look at if I have a GI map, I like to look at it as a whole. I may choose certain supplements based on what else is going on in addition to the H. pylori. So I'll just kind of give you an idea of some things that that we have data on that have been shown to kill H. pylori. But again, I would just say to anyone listening, work with someone that's going to help you get on the right dosage of these, the right combination. It's not just go out and take all of these. I just want to make sure, because I do see people that come to me sometimes that have tried all these different things because they saw it somewhere, or heard it maybe even on a podcast. But what I find is they're not taking it in the right combination and not at the right dosages. So you're kind of wasting your time. You're spinning your wheels. You're potentially buying these supplements that you're not going to get the results that you want unless you have an effective protocol. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, mastic gum is a very common one. You really need a total of about 3 grams of mastic gum a day for H. pylori. Berberine is another common supplement used. Berberine also has a benefit that it decreases inflammation. It helps with metabolic dysfunction. So it's really good for if you have a diabetic or someone who needs some weight loss. It actually can help stimulate weight release. Olive leaf extract is good. Saccharomyces boulardii is another one. I like to kind of think of it as a special probiotic because it works to repair the gut lining and to boost the immunity, the secretory IgA, which is another marker that we see on the GI map. Some essential oils that are good, that have some good data: thyme, lemongrass, cedarwood, melissa. There's also a tea that people may be familiar with or have seen on the internet called Matula tea. Mm-hmm. It's a little pricey, but they do actually have a money back guarantee that if you retest and your levels are not gone down by so much, or that it's gone, they'll give you your money back. I have used that in patients as well and had good results. Digestive bitters. I always use things like enzymes, digestive enzymes, to help, digest the food and help with some of the symptoms. Garlic also, it's an anti-inflammatory. It's got some antibacterial properties. So those are probably the main ones when we're talking, specifically about H. pylori.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. For the listeners, this was not meant to allow you to go make a plan for yourself. I just wanted to let people know there are these different options. And honestly, what I see a lot of times is that people will go the conventional route with prescription medications. And I personally see some holes in the way that that's the way that that's treated for people, and they'll often get reinfected. Or at the same time, when you're taking the prescriptions, you're killing off other beneficial bacteria, right? And so that allows for other bad guys to come in. So I just wanted people to know that there are natural treatments using herbs and other things, essential oils even, which that's actually a new one for me. I haven't tried that with any clients. I normally kind of go with the more herbal route or the tea like you were talking about. But yeah, there's definitely other things out there that we can do that aren't as harmful to the rest of the GI tract.
Absolutely. I just had someone reach out to me the other day, and she was positive she had had a test somewhere else. She was positive for H. pylori, and she said they want me to take antibiotics. And so I explained to her, the side effects of doing that, and the fact that you do, wipe out all of your commensal or good bacteria. So, personally, like you, Rachel, I like to go the natural route, and have had really good success with that, including in myself. So, I think sometimes people just don't realize that and recognize that. And a lot of times we want like a quick fix, but if it's, if the course of antibiotics is less than your natural treatments, which it will be, less time, think of, you have to look at it like, well, what are all of the potential other issues I'm causing from taking these antibiotics? So, really, you're not really helping yourself out. So even if you have to take a natural treatment, for a little bit longer, but you're not causing more harm and you're actually healing the gut, in my mind, that's the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So are there other things that people should be doing in your opinion, rather than just, let's say they do a GI map with you or me or a different functional practitioner, which for people who don't know is a stool sample, and we can see all sorts of different things, parasites, bacteria, the digestive capacity of the GI tract and things like that. So we get these results back, and we have this data, and we want to, treat or self-treat with these herbs and supplements and supporting digestion. But what else outside of that should people be focusing on to help their bodies really heal?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, diet obviously is a big thing in general. I mean, I think foods that we can incorporate that have more probiotics in them. Fermented foods are great. Foods that have a lot of omega fatty acids, because that helps to heal the gut lining. So fish, chia, flaxseed, those type things. Actually, Manuka honey is actually good and has some data with eradicating H. pylori. So that would be another good thing to add in. Avoiding spicy foods, that's often irritates the gut lining. Caffeine also, as much as possible. Carbonated beverages as well, because that can cause a lot of gas and reflux. But other things that you really want to focus on are stress, ways to manage the stress, because think about it. We know the correlation between stress and ulcers. Most people have heard that before, right? And we already mentioned that most ulcers, 80 to 90%, are caused actually from H. pylori. So stress does really impact the gut. There's a huge gut-brain connection there. So, lowering the stress as much as you can, whether that's prayer, meditation, yoga, using essential oils, all of those things really help. We have to make sure we're getting plenty of sleep, because that's when our body heals and repairs. So really 7 to 9 hours is ideal. Dental hygiene is a big thing, especially with H. pylori. So, making sure, that you do have good dental hygiene. Also, think about transmission between family members. We didn't mention this, but I think it's definitely worth mentioning that H. pylori is very contagious. Just drinking after someone, eating, using the same utensil, intercourse, like all of those things, you can transmit and transfer the H. pylori. So those are probably some of the biggest things that I would say to work on.
Okay. Yeah, let's finish up talking about H. pylori a little bit more. So one, you spoke of dental hygiene, which I also think is super important. So what are you having people do for dental care that's a little bit different when they have H. pylori?
Great question. So I like to do this whether you have H. pylori or not, but especially if you do, because a lot of bacteria does live in the mouth. So we could really all benefit from it. But I love tongue scraping. I don't know if your listeners would be familiar with that or not, but once you do it, you will never not do it, is my experience, because not only do you get to see all of the kind of gross and nasty stuff that, collects on your tongue, which a lot of that is bacteria during the night, but it just makes your mouth feel so much fresher and actually makes food taste better. If someone has a problem with halitosis or bad breath, it actually helps with that. So tongue scraping is a really good thing if you don't already do that I would recommend. There's a toothpaste that I also like to use that has some clove and cinnamon in it. And then it also has a mouthwash to go with it. It has a lot of antibacterial essential oils in it. And so those are probably the main things that I would say I like to have people start doing and incorporate if they aren't already doing that.
Okay. Yeah. Love tongue scraping, been tongue scraping for a long time. And if you don't do that or don't know what it is, it's an old Ayurvedic technique, basically. And so just a little tool that's U-shaped, and they're made out of different metals. And you just do a few pulls on your tongue in the morning and get off that excess bacteria. I used to use, so copper material is like one of the original ways that they created them. And I used that for a long time. I actually stopped because I check people's copper levels, and sometimes I see high copper. So I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be using copper on my tongue every day. So I use a stainless steel one. I don't know. Do you have a particular one that you like to use?
I use a stainless steel. I think it's Dr. Tongue's. Like that's like the most common one that you see. You can get it on Amazon, readily available. Yeah, that's the one that I use.
I have that one as too. And do you know the name of the toothpaste and mouthwash that you use with the clove and the cinnamon?
It's called On Guard. It is, it's by doTERRA. So they're an essential oil company, but they have other supplements and products like that. But I like it because it has the clove and the cinnamon, and it's got some peppermint in it. So yeah.
Okay. I will have to check that one out. And another thing I do with people is have them soak their toothbrushes in peroxide.
Yes. I do peroxide, and then I typically add some tea tree oil to that as well. But yeah, I do the exact same thing. I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot to mention that. Yeah.
Yes. I love that. Tea tree oil. And with the transmission between family, are you having everyone else in the family self-treat whenever someone is having the H. pylori come up on the GI map?
So I recommend that, and then it's up to them really with what they want to do. So I will let them know, you can, your, spouse, I mean, it's a little bit different if it's children, but spouse for sure. I typically will say, you could have them take, these particular supplements because they're not harmful. So it would be fine for them to take the supplements, whatever supplements. I have generally the same ones that I've given them. Or they can get tested as well, which is really the best way to go, because then you can see the whole picture, and there may be other things that we need, to treat, to bring back into balance. So that's really the best way to do that, but I'll leave it up to them. Those are, the options.
Okay. So let's switch over to some other things that we could find on this kind of testing. What are some of the most common things that you see?
So definitely H. pylori. I do actually see quite a bit of Candida, a lot of dysbiosis. I would say with opportunistic bacteria, I see a lot of strep overgrowth. I also see a lot of low commensal bacteria, especially Akkermansia, which is one of the key species in the gut. And you really need to have healthy levels of that. I see that one sometimes is even non-existent. I see a lot of low digestive enzymes. Sometimes we see where a level called beta glucuronidase, where the liver is not really detoxing properly, and this level gets elevated. And it can also be elevated from some of the bad bacteria as well. A low, weak immune system. I see that one a lot. E. coli sometimes, C. diff. I see those. And then some of the parasites. I would say blastocystis is probably, more. I see that one more than any others. Dientamoeba is another one that I see a lot of as well. And then some Giardia. But those are probably the biggest things that I see on testing.
Mm-hmm. How would somebody, you said that Akkermansia bacteria species is a really important one, and having low of that obviously is going to negatively impact our bodies. How could somebody, I mean, you can go into a little bit of detail on like what it does for us if you'd like, or how can we make sure that we have healthy levels of that? What should we be doing?
Okay, sure. So with Akkermansia, when your levels are low or maybe even non-existent, there tends to be, it's associated with inflammation. So think of Akkermansia kind of as like a protective good bacteria. Okay. So we tend to see, that there's more inflammation in the gut lining. It's also associated with leaky gut, which that is not uncommon as well. I don't always have people test for leaky gut. That's just done by adding a zonulin level to the GI map. But my school of thought there is if you have a lot of symptoms, you have some level of leaky gut and it's not going to change. I'm going to treat you for leaky gut anyway. And I'm not a big proponent of ordering tests that don't change a treatment. So I don't, unless somebody just wants to, they certainly can. It just costs more money to add in the zonulin. But with the Akkermansia, I like to do, obviously we do probiotics, but I also like to add some polyphenols, have them add in some prebiotics, like prebiotic foods, even bananas, asparagus, onions, garlic, those type things have a lot of prebiotics, which are what the probiotics feed and multiply and grow off of. Fiber. Nobody eats enough fiber, and in order to have good, healthy levels of these bacteria, not just Akkermansia, but some of the other beneficial bacteria, we've got to be eating a lot of fiber in the diet, which, does take some adjusting for most people if they're not used to it, but certainly doable and will definitely help. So those are probably the biggest things that I do for Akkermansia.
Okay. What about Candida? So from what I've seen with GI map testing, I don't know if we're running different ones, but Candida is kind of harder to see on the stool samples because it's a little bit harder, it seems, to grow the yeast on there versus some other forms of testing. Mm-hmm. So if you're seeing Candida, I'm assuming these are pretty overgrown Candida infections. Tell us more about that. Like, to go into how would somebody know if they had Candida and some typical ways of approaching it.
Yeah. So with Candida, I would say the most common symptoms that I see are excessive sugar craving. I mean, the yeast feeds off of sugar, right? So this is usually somebody who is saying, I just love sweets. I want to eat them all the time. I just have this sweet tooth. I can't get rid of it. Bloating is another one that I see a lot. And I would say there's probably two more that I see a lot. It would be skin breakouts. That's very common with Candida. Our skin is our largest organ and where we detox. And so typically if our body is trying its best to get rid of things like Candida that's going on in our body, it'll manifest on the skin. It could be a rash, it could be acne, it could be eczema, it could be psoriasis. And then the other one that I do see some with Candida is joint pain. That's another, but that is also, joint pain is also seen a lot with parasites in my experience. So, if I see someone who has Candida, I mean, there are different supplements that we can use, kind of like I mentioned with the H. pylori. I mean, there are, you can use garlic, you can use, there are some combination supplements out there that have different herbs, some combination essential oils. I usually use probably 2 to 3 different products for the Candida. But, one of the biggest things is going to be your diet. We've got to get to eliminating the sugar. That includes alcohol. Alcohol has a lot of sugar in it. And I find that a lot of times people with Candida do drink alcohol on a regular basis. And I like to really do that in terms of, because I know how it is. I used to have a really bad sweet tooth and just wanted to eat sweets all the time. But transitioning from, white refined sugar to more natural forms of sugar, in my experience, is really how you, stop that just terrible craving that you can get, when you're kind of addicted to sugar and crave it all the time. So really making some of those swaps. I think gluten is always important to eliminate, especially when you're going through a healing protocol. I mean, gluten is a leading cause of leaky gut. It's not good for the gut lining. So at minimum, when I have people on protocol, then I have them eliminate all gluten. And then, with Candida, I like to do more of a paleo or Whole30 type diet is typically what I do. I mean, you want good, healthy carbs that have fiber, but you don't want, again, too many carbs either. So yeah, those are probably the biggest things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cause Candida feeds off of sugar, for anybody who doesn't know that. And I find a good swap for the sugar is monk fruit. I like monk fruit because it doesn't have that actual any sweet basis to it. So that's a great substitute.
Yes.
And with do you find a lot of co-infections when you see Candida? Because I do know Candida normally likes to feed off of things like heavy metals and other byproducts of bacteria and things like that, correct?
Yes. And I mean, typically see a lot of opportunistic bacterial overgrowth. Sometimes we see H. pylori with it. Sometimes a parasite, but yes, I don't know that I've ever seen somebody with just Candida. No, there's always something else going on. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the tongue too, having like a white coating on the tongue. Do you ever see that
Yes.
often? I feel like since we were talking about the dental care, right? And the tongue scraping, if you're scraping your tongue every day and you notice a white coating on the tongue, very, very possibly could be some Candida there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can get like thrush in the mouth, what you're talking about with the white coating. Also, I didn't mention this, but I think it's worth mentioning. A lot of women that I see that have Candida are having these recurrent yeast infections. And, it's because they have so much Candida living in their body. So it can, manifest in other areas and ways. So yeah, definitely something to think about if you're experiencing any of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. What about, digestive enzymes? Let's talk about those. I feel like digestive enzymes can be confusing for people because there's a lot of different kinds. And then we have like HCl and we have systemic enzymes. And can you give us a little bit of information on those for people who have no clue?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I like to use more of a pancreatic enzyme now and I'll speak to HCl in just a minute, but I like to use a digestive enzyme I use it in all of my clients. I mean, basically we don't make as many digestive enzymes as we age, and you're not really getting a lot of digestive enzymes from your food unless you're eating a ton of raw vegetables. So most people, especially with symptoms, bloating, gas, constipation, even diarrhea, you need some digestive enzymes. And again, if you're doing testing, we can look at the levels on the GI map, but also, digestive enzymes is something really easy that I would recommend if someone's having these symptoms and they want to try something. That's something that you can go out and just get and try. I would certainly recommend that. That's one thing that I did years ago that helped me so much with my symptoms. And I still take digestive enzymes now. They're really helpful too if you, let's say, don't normally eat something like gluten, but you're going out, it's, a special occasion, you're going to eat some cake or pizza or whatever, I may do that and take 2 or 3 digestive enzymes. And then I don't have any kind of, symptoms, feel bad after eating it. It just helps you. Not only does it help you break down your food, it helps you absorb nutrients from your food. So I think that that's something that's important for people to understand as well. Because if your gut lining is not healthy, you're most likely not absorbing nutrients the way that you should. So anything that we can do to help that. So I love digestive enzymes. Now, HCl, I've taken HCl myself. There's a couple of schools of thought on this as well. If you have H. pylori, some practitioners think if you give HCl, which that's just acid, basically. I mean, you could even do like a shot of apple cider vinegar. That would be a more mild form than taking an HCl pill. But some practitioners believe that if you do that, and let's say you have H. pylori, that the acid can be very irritative to the gut lining until the H. pylori is gone, the lining is healed, then you should introduce the acid. Then there is another school of thought that it's fine, to do acid, HCl or apple cider vinegar along, with trying to eradicate the H. pylori. And I have actually done both. Even in myself, I started out taking some HCl, felt like it helped, but then I did a little more reading and I thought, well, I think I'm just going to hold off until after I'm done with the protocol and the H. pylori is gone. So that's how I treat most of my patients now. I don't give HCl along with herbs that I'm using to kill the H. pylori. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah. So the way I was taught is also H. pylori will thrive more in an acidic environment if we're continue to feed it with maybe too much hydrochloric acid. So that's definitely how I was taught, and that's how I go about it as well, just to be safe. So I haven't experimented with giving anybody HCl while doing the H. pylori treatment. So I just stick to that, and yeah, it seems to work just fine. And we do other digestive enzymes during that process to help them, like you said, break down and absorb food. And yeah, I think that works great. And from what I know, like you said, with digestive enzymes in general, as long as it's not HCl based, they're very safe. Like
yes,
you could take a digestive enzymes and play around with them and see some great improvements. HCl, on the other hand, is acid. So it is like a little bit more intensive, and there's some limit to that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So always looking at what exactly you're taking for sure.
Yes.
Let's see. What else have we not touched on that you really want to share with people? Maybe something that you deal with a lot, or something that people miss in the GI map testing with gut issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say a couple of things. I think one of the biggest things that people overlook, and this is not something that I find, well, there is a correlation on testing, but is stress. I know, just again, speaking from personal experience, my gut got like 90, maybe 80 to 90% better. But it wasn't until I eliminated the stress in my life that everything was completely gone. Like I could just see, I could really tell and see the connection there. And so I have, clients often that I know the ones, I mean, you can really spot them that stress is really affecting them and their gut, because they are constantly messaging, emailing, and they just have this nervousness and they're so worried. And, I try to say, we've got to work on your stress management. And everybody wants to skip past that and breeze over that because it's not fun. And it's like, well, we all have stress. I can't eliminate it all. And I agree that most people can't, but there are things that you can do to try and manage it, and it will help your gut so much. The other thing that I would just say to people is I think a lot of times we normalize the abnormal. We say things like, well, I only go to the bathroom twice a week. That's normal for me. It's like, no, that's not normal for anyone, but we've had certain symptoms for so long that it has become our quote normal, but it's not normal. And there is an underlying issue. So I would just say, don't accept any, if you have certain symptoms that you think, oh, I really wish I could get rid of this, but it's probably just the way I am. No, you need to keep digging. You need to find the right person to work with that, again, will partner with you to really, dig deep and uncover what's actually going on so that you can heal, so that you can, be at your highest state of wellness. So I just want to encourage people, don't just accept things because you think that's the way they've always been, or, that's the way that they have to be.
Mm-hmm. Great point. That is totally an issue I see, especially with social media and the way that people will proclaim their health issues and kind of be proud of them, which is absolutely nothing wrong with that having that self-love and that self-confidence in yourself. But just because someone else is also having that issue doesn't mean it's not fixable. And like you said, finding the right person to help you, even if you've been shut down a few times, you've tried it in the past, there are practitioners out there. You just have to find the right one who will work in a partnership and really talk through things and figure out what's going on and how you can get to that true root cause. Before we wrap up though, since you said stress was such a big part of your healing, tell us just a little bit more about that. What do you have clients do to manage their stress, or maybe what have you done that some people can take away with them and go try on their own that could really help move the needle in their health?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me personally, and, everybody's stress comes from a different source. I don't know what it is for, people who are listening, but I'll just share my experience. For me, it was really realizing that I needed to focus on the things that were in my control and let go of the things that were not. And it also meant letting go of certain relationships, that were more toxic. So, I would just encourage people, think if you, and again, we all have stress, just sit and think, what causes you to feel stressed? Because for me, I can feel it in my gut, like immediately. If something stresses me out, I feel it immediately. It's almost like a nauseous or indigestion type feeling. And everybody's not that way, but awareness is key. I would just say, start being really aware of your body. Be what I like to call a student of your body. Understand what's going on. When do you get stressed? What is happening when you're most stressed? And then, we can do things like deep breathing. And I used to not like to do any of these things. I'm telling you, I'm just I like to work. I like to constantly be going. And, sometimes that catches up with you and you have to just stop. And I'm not great at meditation. I want to be, but my personality is, my mind is just constantly going. So that's something that I have to be intentional about and practice. So, prayer, meditation. I do use a lot of essential oils, like calming essential oils when I'm feeling that way. And then also just kind of, to be honest, I talk to myself a lot, not out loud, but, in my head, and then I think, okay, if there's a situation that's happening, I think, okay, is there something that I can do about this? If there's not, then I have to let it go. And I'm not saying that's easy, but again, just kind of talking yourself through things, or sometimes I'll even think to myself, okay, what is the positive in this situation? And try to focus on that, focus on things that you're grateful for. I mean, all of these things we know lower our stress levels. So those are kind of the things that I try to talk to my patients about and that have worked for me personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all really great tips. I like that you said to first be aware. And I think one really great way to do that is to journal for a couple weeks,
Yes.
maybe, and just at the end of the day, really process what happened, what did trigger you, what stressed you out, or how are you feeling? Are you having a good day? Or are you having a bad day? And what did that day look like? So you can really pinpoint where it's coming from. And then you can kind of go deeper and figure out, like you said, is it a relationship you need to kind of separate yourself from or restructure? Is it something that you can't change that, again, you're saying you like, let's accept this and maybe let's just do some deep breathing and practice meditation in order to move through those emotions and through that stress. So I love all of those tips that you just gave.
Thanks.
So I always like to ask for the last question, if you could give listeners just one action to take this week that's going to help them live a healthier, happier life, what would that be?
Gosh. Well, I mean, we were talking about awareness, but I won't say that. I mean, that is one. I think the awareness is the key to transformation. So if you're looking to transform something, you have to be aware. But you know what? I think this is just super simple. And I know people say it all the time, but I think people don't drink enough water. I mean, water like literally is like the cure for a lot of stuff. I mean, if you're dehydrated, you're not going to be able to think as well. Yes. I mean, I always have mine with me everywhere I go. And I even now, still have to tell myself, okay, make sure, go drink some more water, make sure and my kids, I have like literally always, they'll say, such and such, oh, my stomach hurts, my head hurts, go drink some water. Like, because most people walk around in a dehydrated state and our body is made up of mostly water. So I just think that is like just a simple, healthy thing that you can do that you don't often realize how much it matters, especially if you're drinking things like sodas. Start replacing one a day with a glass of water and you will start to see how much better you will feel, for sure.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great tip. We're, what are we, 60% water in our bodies?
Yeah.
So it's extremely vital. And tying it in with awareness, I actually have a client right now. That was one of her struggles, was drinking enough water. And we do some food journaling in the beginning for a couple of weeks just to kind of see, again, building awareness of what are you actually eating? How are you feeling? And water intake. And now she loves tracking her water. She just she has to track it every day still because
awesome.
that helps her drink it. For me, I have a large 32-ounce glass water bottle that I carry with me and I make sure I fill it up a certain amount of times per day. So, I think, like you said, building the awareness and then finding little ways to make sure you're actually getting it in are the first steps to having enough. So yes. And what is enough? Let's just give our listeners that last kind of how much water am I supposed to be drinking?
Great question. So I like to say a minimum of half your body weight in ounces. I mean, if you can get to like your full body weight in ounces, that's amazing. But a minimum of half your body weight in ounces.
Right. So if I'm 120 pounds, then I would want to do 60 ounces of water per day.
Yes, correct.
Great.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. You can, feel free to share any information if we missed something or if you have any offers out right now. Otherwise, just where can people find you to reach out if they want to work with you or have questions?
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great. I could talk about this all day. I know we both enjoy this topic, but you can find me. I'm mainly on Instagram. I'm at Julie Ann Wellness is my handle. Same thing on Facebook. My website is julieannwellness.com. And I do have a free, if you go to my website, it's called 4 Gut Hacks You Need to Know. So it's about maintaining a healthy gut and just simple things that you can do at home. And that's a free ebook. So if you want to go and download that, I usually send out 1 email a week with just, sometimes it's a healthy recipe, some sort of tip. It may be some sort of special offer that I'm doing, but just health and wellness related in general. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. And we'll have all of that stuff in the show notes so you guys can just go right in there and reach out on IG, Facebook, or her website.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching the episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure that you like the video and leave a comment and share it with a friend who really needs to hear it. Because when you share this information, you're also going to help other people level up their health. And if you or somebody else you know wants to work on their health and they're looking for a functional medicine practitioner, feel free to reach out to me to apply to work together. Thanks for watching, and keep striving to become your healthiest, happiest self.